The email arrived at 8:47 a.m., a time chosen with cruel, surgical precision.
Not too early to seem cruel, not too late to invite questions. Just late enough that everyone would already be at their desks, coffee in hand, settling into another ordinary Tuesday except for me. Please report to conference room C at 9:00 a.m. HR will be present. No greeting, no signature, just a digital summons that felt like a judge's gavel. I already knew what it meant. For 22 years, I had worked at Orion Dynamics, rising from a junior analyst with a second-hand suit and student loans to vice president of strategic development. I had built teams, closed deals across 3 continents, and helped grow the company from a modest tech supplier into a global giant. And now, as rumors of a historic $3 billion merger with Helix Solutions dominated the corridors, I was being called into a room with HR. When I walked in, she was already there. Laura Whitman, my boss, the newly appointed chief operating officer, the woman who just 6 months earlier had smiled in my office and told me, "You're the backbone of this merger. I couldn't do it without you." She didn't look at me when I sat down. HR slid a folder across the table. Severance details, non-disclosure agreement, a carefully worded explanation about organizational restructuring and realignment of strategic priorities. Laura finally met my eyes. "This is for the best," she said softly. "The board wants a fresh direction." A fresh direction that apparently did not include the man who had designed the merger strategy, negotiated the preliminary terms, and built the trust between 2 corporate giants. I was out in 15 minutes. No farewell, no thank you, just a cardboard box, a silent elevator ride, and a security badge that no longer opened doors. At home, I sat in my study staring at the city skyline, trying to understand how 22 years could be erased so cleanly. My wife, Sarah, watched me quietly, knowing better than to speak before I was ready. "She planned this," I finally said. She didn't ask who, she already knew. Laura Whitman and I had history. Years ago, when we were both directors, we had competed for the same promotion. I got it. She congratulated me with a smile that never reached her eyes. From that moment, something shifted. Polite in meetings, professional in emails, but underneath it all, there was a tension that never quite dissolved. When she rose to COO, I assumed it was finally behind us. I even supported her appointment to the board. I thought we were allies now. I was wrong. 2 weeks after my termination, news broke across financial networks. Orion Helix merger collapses in shock reversal. The deal, valued at nearly $3 billion, had been months in the making. It was supposed to reshape the industry. Instead, it imploded overnight. Helix Solutions withdrew, citing strategic misalignment and undisclosed internal risks. Undisclosed risks. That phrase burned into my mind. I still had contacts at Orion, old colleagues who trusted me, people who knew I had nothing left to lose. One of them, a senior legal advisor named Marcus, agreed to meet me for coffee. "You didn't hear this from me," he said, glancing around the cafe, but Laura pushed through a last-minute change to the integration plan. She overrode compliance, cut corners on regulatory disclosures, and rushed the board vote. Helix found inconsistencies during their final audit. "Inconsistencies?" I asked. "Big ones, enough to make them walk." I felt a chill. The merger framework I had built was airtight, every risk mapped, every regulation checked. The only way it could unravel was if someone tampered with it. "Why would she do that?" I asked. Marcus hesitated. "Because if the merger succeeded, your fingerprints would be all over it. The board would remember who really made it happen." The truth settled like a weight in my chest. She hadn't just fired me. She had erased me. And in doing so, she had sabotaged a $3 billion deal to make sure my legacy died with it. Revenge is a dangerous word. It suggests rage, recklessness, destruction, but what I felt wasn't anger. It was clarity. Laura had made one critical mistake. She assumed that once I was out of the building, I was out of the game. She forgot that I had spent 2 decades learning how power really works. I started quietly. I reviewed old emails, meeting notes, draft documents, everything I had legally retained. Then I compared them to the public filings Orion released after my departure. The discrepancies were subtle, but they were there. Risk assessments altered, compliance timelines shortened, regulatory language softened. It wasn't illegal on its face, but it was misleading. And in the corporate world, misleading can be just as lethal. I reached out to Helix. Not through official channels, but through a former colleague who now sat on their advisory board. We met in a private office overlooking the river. They think Laura hid something, he told me, but they can't prove intent, only incompetence. I slid a folder across the table. This is what the plan looked like before she took over, I said, and this is what it became. He studied the documents in silence. She removed entire sections on regulatory exposure, he murmured. Why? Because those sections were authored by me, I replied. The room went still. You're saying she stripped out your safeguards to rush the deal and minimize your role. I'm saying she gambled with $3 billion to rewrite history. What followed was not a dramatic courtroom showdown or a headline-grabbing lawsuit, at least not at first. It was an investigation. Helix reopened its internal review, then regulators took interest. Then Orion's own board began asking uncomfortable questions. Laura was called to explain why compliance officers had been bypassed, why risk committees were pressured to approve incomplete data, why timelines had been accelerated against legal advice. Her answers were confident, polished, carefully rehearsed. But facts have a way of surfacing. An email chain revealed that she had personally ordered the removal of certain disclosures. A recorded meeting showed her dismissing legal concerns with the words, "We don't need this level of detail slowing us down." The narrative shifted. This wasn't a failed merger due to market conditions. It was a failure of leadership. And leadership had a name. 3 months after my termination, Orion announced that Laura Whitman had stepped down effective immediately. The press release cited differences in strategic direction and the need to restore stakeholder confidence. In private, the board was less diplomatic. The merger collapse had wiped billions off the company's market value. Shareholders were furious, lawsuits loomed, and the internal review made it impossible to ignore that the disaster traced back to one person's decisions. Her career, built so carefully, unraveled with stunning speed. As for me, Helix offered me a consulting role not out of pity but out of respect. They wanted the architect of the deal that should have been. They wanted the man who had warned of the very risks that had destroyed it. When I walked into their headquarters for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt since the day I was fired. Validation. Not the loud, triumphant kind, the quiet kind that tells you the truth has finally found its voice. Months later, I saw Laura at an industry conference. She was no longer on the main stage, no keynote, no entourage, just another attendee standing alone near the coffee table. Our eyes met. For a moment, the noise of the hall faded. 22 years of ambition, 6 months of betrayal, 3 months of consequences. She walked over. "You planned this," she said. I shook my head. "No, I told the truth. The rest happened on its own." She studied my face, searching for anger, for gloating. She found neither. "I wanted to make sure the board forgot about you," she said quietly. I didn't think it would cost everything." I met her gaze. "Rewriting history is expensive," I said. "You just learned the real price." People love stories of revenge that end with explosions, firings, and public humiliation. But the real lesson of what happened isn't about vengeance. It's about integrity. Laura believed power meant control over narratives, over people, over outcomes. She believed she could erase a man's contribution by removing his name from a document and his face from a boardroom. She forgot that truth leaves a trail. And trails sooner or later are followed. She ended my job. In trying to end my legacy, she wrecked a $3 billion deal. And in the end, the very system she tried to manipulate became the mirror that reflected her choices back to her, clearly, mercilessly, and inescapably. That is the quiet, devastating form of corporate revenge. Not the kind driven by rage. The kind delivered by truth.